Welcome to Escapists Anonymous, the fantasy fiction book club. I'm Sam.
And I'm Dan.
This week, we follow Aurea, a human living in a world of vampires, as she enters the Kajari, a deadly tournament for vampires in honor of the goddess Nyaxia, where the winner is granted a world-changing boon. There's going to be action, blood, suspense, blood, mysteries, more blood, and even more blood, and of course spoilers, and possibly a little bit more blood, as we cover chapters 1 to 12 of Carissa Broadbent's opening novel in her Crowns of Nyaxia series, The Serpent and the Wings of Night. Are you ready for some blood, Dan?
Sounds like I absolutely need to be prepared for some blood.
It's been a long time since I've read a book this gory in the first 120 pages. We get it a little bit in other stuff like Abercrombie. He'll often have quite a gory opener to really kind of throw you into the deep end. But this was something like...
Yeah, it picked up quickly. I guess we've read maybe another book like it with God Killer, where it's like we're going to use the actions and the interactions to really kind of introduce you to the world. But there were some pretty bloody interactions.
Talking about introducing us to the world, shall I do the blurb?
You do the blurb, yes.
Okay.
Human or vampire, the rules of survival are the same. Never trust, never yield, and always, always guard your heart. The adopted human daughter of the night-born vampire king, Aurea, carved her place in a world designed to kill her. Her only chance to become something more than prey is to enter the Kajari, a legendary tournament held by the goddess of death herself. But winning won't be easy against the most vicious warriors from all three vampire houses. To survive, Aurea will be forced to make an alliance with a mysterious rival. Everything about Rain is dangerous. He is a ruthless vampire, an efficient killer, an enemy to her father's crown, and her greatest competition. Yet, what terrifies Aurea most of all is that she finds herself strangely drawn to him. But there's no room for compassion in the Kajari, and nothing more deadly than love.
I mean, even though I hadn't read that blurb before, the moment she met Rain across a crowded room, I thought, she likes him. That's the one. He's the one.
Yeah, I think that feels like it probably is taking us in the direction that I've got from the first 12 chapters that we've read. I think I read that probably ages and ages ago when we were first thinking about covering this book, and have no further memory of it other than thinking, oh, the cover looks pretty cool, let's give it a go. But I think it there's a heavy play on the love and the romance stuff there that I guess we're getting a little bit of an indication. There's some pretty hostile foreplay going on in the first 12 chapters.
That's how I like my foreplay, hostile.
I mean, you have to go hard with vampires. Oh, I don't know. Maybe I'll edit that statement out. That sounded weird. But they're not going to be gentle, are they? I guess there's a lot at stake. So
another good one.
Hey! Didn't even think of that when I said it.
But before we get too far into it, we need a recap of what's happened so far in the book. Would you care to do the honours?
Yeah. Okay, let's keep this quick. So, as you said, the story follows Aurea, a human girl raised by the vampire king Vincent after being rescued as a child. Now an adult, Aurea is preparing to compete in the deadly vampire tournament, the Kajari, held once every 100 years and overseen by the goddess Nyaxia. The trials are notoriously dangerous, and the tournament's victor receives a divine gift from Nyaxia herself. Aurea's motivation is that she wants to become Vincent's Cariati, bonding her to Vincent and making her a vampire without the risk of death that becoming a vampire would usually bring. As Aurea trains with Vincent, tensions rise due to the life-threatening nature of the Kajari and the potential risks to those close to her, including her close friend Alana, a human woman who risks being caught up and used as a human sacrifice. When the Kajari begins, Aurea faces deadly challenges immediately and finds Alana brutally killed, after which she kills a nearby sleeping, overfed vampire. After having some of the rules of the Kajari explained by the Minister, there is a meal for all the contestants, where a tall, dark and mysterious vampire called Rain, who appears to be interested in Aurea, uses a powerful magic called Asteris to kill the brother of the vampire that Aurea has just killed. In the first official trial of the Kajari, they have to overcome demons, but Aurea realises that these are blood-borne vampires who have then been turned into demons. Working together with Rain, they figure out how to kill them, but not before Aurea takes a couple of very serious injuries. Rain offers her an alliance for the upcoming half-moon trial, and she forces him to admit that his main motivation is that she will be much easier to kill after the trial than the other vampires. Aurea declines the offer, but after she is gravely wounded in an attack by a vampire, she stumbles and crawls towards the area of the Moon Palace where she knows he is staying, and we end with Aurea being lifted off the ground by Rain. That's the high-level summary. It feels like we're still at the very early stages, I think, of this story, but we have actually had quite a lot packed in to just those first 12 chapters. What are your initial first impressions?
I mean, a book involving vampires, and it's everything I expected of a vampire-dominated world. You know, the dresses and clothing all sound exactly how I'd picture it if I was to create a vampire world. Everything just feels dark, mysterious, opulent. You know, it's all marble, granite, silks. When you suggested doing this book, I was like, okay, this could be trashy. I'm loving it so much more than I expected.
Yeah, I've always loved vampire movies and TV shows. I was a massive Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan, and this and actually when I was walking around Waterstones, Northampton, I picked this up. I saw the cover and I was intrigued and picked it up, and one of the young booksellers came over to me and was like, that book's going to be massive in the next couple of years. It's kind of like a cross between Twilight, Buffy the Vampire Slayer and The Hunger Games. And I think I get what she's saying, but in my head, all of the visuals that we've had described to us here, I don't know whether you've seen the Underworld movies with Kate Beckinsale.
The first one.
Yeah. So, you don't need to watch the others. It's one of those trilogies. I think there's more than 3 now. But
there might be.
But yeah, like it's super dark. You've got the really old vampires that, that, like you were saying, the way they dress, it's all very kind of, classic, gothic classic. And then even with Aurea, and I can't remember Kate Beckinsale's character's name, but obviously Kate Beckinsale spends the whole film dressed in like a leather one piece. Basically, we've got Aurea kind of walking around in sort of full leather, ready for action. Yeah,
like I don't see hers as being quite so kind of like restrictive movement. It's almost kind of like built for function, but it's all kind of like tight combat wear or something like that. But it's got that high Victorian kind of camp to it. Are you aware of the video game based on the RPG series Vampire the Masquerade?
No.
So like when I was reading this, they introduced, you've got the House of Night, the House of Shadow, the House of Blood, and they've all got their different aesthetics, their skills. Like that's a video game and like a background RPG series, like tabletop RPG, where like you have different houses of vampires and they kind of embody different kind of archetypes of vampire. And you've got that here because you've got the House of Night with their flowing silks. They're much more kind of, classic Dracula. I kind of feel like, please, welcome, so smooth and calm. Where you've got the House of Shadow seem to be much more that kind of more steampunky almost, kind of like corsets, big tight gowns, like fitted little military style jackets. They've all got their own little thing. I mean, the House of Blood seems to be more kind of armored, a bit more kind of classic Vlad the Impaler almost, I guess.
Yeah.
They're kind of built for combat. So I really like that, and I want to know if there are more. I mean, the world at this point is leaving so much open that I want to know more about, because not only do you have potential other vampire kingdoms, more to learn about each of those, but because we know there's the all the other gods, the White Pantheon, I think it's called, and so there's it's not just vampires all the way down. There's going to be human kingdoms, there's going to be other fantasy creatures in this world who actually worship other gods that aren't Nyaxia.
Yeah.
So I'm already intrigued, and I think what Carissa Broadbent has done really well is she's gone big world, but I've trapped you all in the Moon Palace.
Yeah.
And that as a setting, I also really love.
Yeah, but we've had with some of the flashbacks to Araya being younger, and even some of the conversation between her and Vincent, we have these references to kind of obviously where he rescued her from, and the fact that he can't go back there, and all of these kind of mysteries about the conflicts that there are between the different vampire houses, and all that stuff. And then obviously the fact that gods are obviously these very almost tangible things in this world, where it's Nyaxia is this woman who presumably there will be some interactions with.
I mean, at the moment we've got the minister, who is her representative in the vampire society, and seemingly he says, I've overseen 21 Kajaris, which if there's one every 100 years, that means he's been there since the first one, because Nyaxia created vampires 2,000 years ago. So did he interact with Nyaxia? Was he there for when all this happened? Because there's one part of him that's kind of depicted as, corrupt Catholic kind of archbishop, pope kind of vibe. But then if he's always been there and he's always been the one leading the Church of Nyaxia, whatever it is, then maybe he is more kind of directly appointed by Nyaxia, rather than the corruption set in and he's just there because he was the most politically powerful person.
The way I kind of got that was he's the host on the floor, but she's controlling everything. The way that when they get called for the first trial and everything, just the palace just disappears. It's there's some really powerful, and we know there's powerful magic stuff. This asterisk thing that Ray uses, and there's magic is a feature of this world. But that whole I'm literally just gonna pick you all up and move you into a different setting, and you've got to figure out. It felt like a very powerful magic that was being almost directly handled by Nyaxia herself.
So she's present but also distant, because we know so little about her. There's no kind of she's telling us this. It's it's all just coming from the minister being. But also
when Araya's doing the the blood sort of ceremony thing to enter the Kajari, she says that she feels something happening in terms of the bond or giving away control to Nyaxia. I can't remember the exact way she explains
her
it.
Her presence was there.
Yeah.
If she is this powerful goddess, though, and she has some kind of knowledge, then I kind of feel like she'll be set against Araya, because the opening line of the book kind of says she is the cause of the downfall of the vampires and the kingdom and the vampiric empire. So I feel like Araya's kind of going up against Nyaxia without kind of realizing it.
Yeah. Well, and this is where maybe that Hunger Games comparison comes into focus, where it's you're sort of part of the system and you have to play the games of the system, but through playing the games of the system you bring the system down. and maybe that's a kind of potential direction that we're heading, because I feel like there's some stuff that maybe Vincent hasn't been very honest with Araya about, and which we can delve into at some point. But like that, you know, I think we're on this journey of discovery with Araya where maybe she's going to be disappointed with some things that she finds out.
Yeah, like I don't think by the end of either this book or, you know, the second book in the series, whether she's going to want to be a vampire. I know at the moment, because, you know, I think as a character she's great. Like, she's unpleasant, but you completely understand why. Because she hates herself. She sees her human weakness and as something to despise, and she wants to like purge it out of her, because she's constantly surrounded by vampires who are more powerful than her. She constantly lives in fear. She's like this kind of coiled spring of anger and survival instinct, you know, like she just is just prepared to fight everybody at any second, and she's only ever really relaxed when it's just her and Vincent.
Yeah.
And, you know, so when she has those interactions with Rain, he's like, if you go down there, you won't survive. And she's just like, just stabs him. Because, like, she's like, why give him even the chance? And that other vampire who turns up, who she's just like, oh, I'm not going to win this fight, I'm out. And she just pegs it, you know?
Yeah, she's this kind of constantly paranoid, angry... But like and this is one of the things that I've got a slight sort of niggle about. It's like, oh, if you were preparing for this thing, and obviously Vincent's been through this before, she's a bit like unstrategic with her relationship building. It's like, just because everyone's trying to kill you, it doesn't mean that you can't use those relationships. If that was me, I'd be like, well, why not sort of at least use some of these relationships to help me survive for a little bit longer into the contest. That's
a really good point, because, you know, we know that Vincent has been training her up for, what was it, like 14 years or something, or like ages. And he's like, you must be prepared for every single part of the Kajari. And so she's this expert fighter. Like, you feel like, you know, she knows exactly tactically how to, you know, survive on her own. But the one thing he didn't really cover was, like, at some point you're going to have to form a team and be nice to people. Like, that's just the one bit they've not covered. You know? Because, you know, they make it really clear. It's like, you have to team up with people, otherwise you're going to die in the Half Moon trial.
Yeah.
And, So when Rain's like, we should team up, she's like, I'm not teaming up with anybody. Oh, actually, now that I think about it, maybe that would be a good idea.
There's this like, we spent 14 years preparing, but literally every single thing that happens takes her by surprise.
But you know, and like she has to be forced to such extremes to get to this point where, you know, like, she's been stabbed in her legs, she's stabbed everywhere, she's like bleeding out, she's like, all right, maybe I need some help. Oh.
Tis but a
scratch.
Tis but a scratch.
But again, it's like, it's almost like, you know, she is an incredibly powerful person. You get that she's very capable. That's what the opening scene where she's killing that vampire who's hunting that boy. She comes in, she knows exactly what to do. It really just conveys that, actively telling us, like, she is really able to handle herself, and she's trained, and she can do all of this, right?
Yeah.
But she isn't perfect. Like, she's not one of those characters who just does everything amazingly. Like, as a result of her psychology and her training and everything that's built up to her, she has failings, and she hasn't yet been able to overcome them. And so you kind of feel like, you know, if you were viewing this from inside the world, watching Araya, not knowing this was a story where she's the central character, you'd know that she did have this fatal flaw, and there's a chance that she might not make it to the end because she has been unable to make a connection with anyone beyond Vincent. But that's entirely because she's a result of her upbringing. It's believable that she has this flaw. And, you know, when she's, you know, she's also not perfect at the combat. Like, she has been through the ringer, and we're 12 chapters in, you know, 120 pages, like, through a 600-page book. You know, like, at this point, it's a bit like John McClane or something like that. You're like, how are you going to keep taking more hits? Yeah. How much blood do you have left in you?
Yeah. No, you're right. And I guess that it kind of brings me on to that very short-lived relationship with Alana, obviously the relationship might not have been short-lived. They've known each other for years, but like our experience of it is like, oh, here's this person she's super close to, and then in like, 2 chapters time, it's like, and she is brutally torn apart by vampires.
Yeah.
And what did you make of that? Was that a blunt instrument kind of? Now I'm mad. They've killed my friend.
No, because it's a message to us as the reader and also to her within the story that because we're kind of thinking, oh, but maybe if she learns to be more human, she'll survive. Like Alana, she is this vibrant human existing with the vampire world, and they're like, no, dispel any notion. Like, you as a reader know that like if she gives in too much to any of that softer side, she's gonna die. There's the threat. And for her, as she's burning Alana's body, she's effectively purging the humanity from herself, because Alana embodied any kind of human weakness that she thought she could allow within herself, and she's like, no, not in the Kajari. It's done. Burn it down, and I just have to be as like vampiric as possible from this point onwards.
I guess the other part of my question on blunt instrument was like, did we get to know Alana enough to kind of care?
But we were supposed to see her as like this, as like a mentor role, you've got Vincent for the vampire side, Alana for the human side, and in my mind I was already constructing to see where those two characters would go and have that effect. I didn't know how they might communicate with the outside world, but I thought at some point, like for instance in that crowd scene when they're doing the first trial, like she'd look up and she'd see Alana in the crowd being like, come on, you can do it. But no, they strip it all away. So I just see it as this kind of upending of expectations. This character who you're expecting to be around for a long time is just wiped out because there is no space for her in this world. Yeah,
except from the moment she said, fine, I'll go in the morning, I was like, she's not going anywhere. I thought as soon as I read that, as soon as she said, fine, I won't go now, I'll go in 12 hours time, I was like, dead person. But yeah, I'm just going to be interested to see how they kind of soften her up with this Rain character. I guess sort of going back to the blurb, so far he hasn't come across as some kind of ruthless opponent or anything. He's actually multiple times tried to be quite almost helpful, and he's intrigued by her. Like, it is coming across as more of like a sort of flirting romantic interest from him rather than a sort of he's this brutal enemy and I've fallen in love with him, or whether it goes that way. Or
the way I see it going, and again this book could aim to upend all this. So we see that he is a bit ruthless because he seeks to antagonize that fight just so he can use Asteris in front of everybody to show how powerful he is. When he kind of effectively just Kamehameha just obliterates that vampire. Like, he's ruthless. He'll use like his kind of charm and or like ability to manipulate people to get what he wants. And in the conversation that he has with Araya, he does say something along the lines of, all right, fine, I want you to survive to the second half because you'll be an easier person to kill later on. I think what's happening, Dan, is you're falling for his charms. And you want to believe that there's that good side to him, whereas like, what we're seeing from Araya's perspective is, because she is just so used to this kind of like every vampire trying to, ooh, I'm going to seduce you, and like, ooh, yes, become my victim. And she's like, I'm not falling for any of that. You try and say anything nice to me, I automatically assume you have an ulterior motive, and I just want you out of here. So I think she's right to keep pushing him, and she's like, and what's your real reason? And what's your real reason? And then he's just like, okay, you got me. Yeah, I want you on my side because you might have Vincent on your side.
Yeah.
And also because then I can just kill you later. So he is like absolutely conniving. But I also think that there is something that he's drawn to with Araya, which means he might, almost inevitably going to make an exception. And I wonder if it's because she has some kind of destiny in her blood or something, because when she's said that vampires do go a bit crazy around her and they can't control themselves, and is that the case with all humans? And then Rain says, you smell absolutely delicious, and her smell's all over. Like, is she a bit more special? Which comes back to the point I was going to say earlier, which is, if by the end of this, what if she does win, and they come to do she gets the boon from Nyaxia, and she becomes the Koryotai, but doesn't turn into a vampire. Somehow she can absorb vampiric powers while staying human or something like that. And that's why, you had Vincent in the initial prologue fly down, drawn to her like this one little life in amongst all of this stuff, because she actually does give off some kind of thing that vampires can see, but only a few understand what it is. Others just think that she's super delicious.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Obviously, we've had a few references to her sort of trying to conjure magic and stuff like that. So I wonder, whether she's going to sort of unlock some part of her that, like you're saying, sort of there's something special about her. No one, even her, really kind of knows what it is.
But again, she's trying to be too vampiric, and she can't use vampire magic. Whereas you've got that other vampire, I think her name is Misha, and she's using the fire magic from Atroxus. Part of me thinks, well, Araya's going to befriend her and learn that she can use Atroxus's magic. She's going to realize that it's not necessarily about being human, it's about not being vampire, and that there's power to be had elsewhere. And so I reckon she might be wielding some other kind of magic by the end of this book.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting. I'm not sure whether I want that to happen or not. Like whether it makes her less of a kind of underdog in the story, if you know what I mean. Like it's, there's something kind of old school romantic about it, just being like the human having to fight the vampires. But
I mean, do you think she'll become a vampire at the end of this book?
No.
Well, what do you think will cause her to not? Is she going to win? Is she not going to win? What's she going to wish for? Because at the moment,
the blurb indicates that Rain is some kind of specific enemy of her father. Like, not just like he's a part of some other house, but like there is some kind of actual historic specific beef going on between the two of them. And I wonder whether this is going to come, and touched on it earlier, like there's something that Vincent isn't being particularly honest about in Araya's past, and whether through her and Rain becoming romantically entwined, she's going to find out some of the truth, and that's going to cause her to have to make a decision. And again, like this is very much reminding me of the plot of Underworld, or at least one of the Underworld films, where this literally that specific storyline unfolds, where like her father, who obviously adopted her as a child, turns out that he was responsible for the death of all of her family and that kind of thing. So that I get, maybe I'm being too influenced by that, but
no. I in my head I had it slightly different. I was expecting that because Rain is Rishon, so it's from the territory where she's from. I was expecting, because there was that big uprising, and that's what all the violence. He was involved in the destruction of her city, so she'll be getting closer to Rain, and then Vincent will go, "Don't you realise who he really is and what he did to potentially your family?" And then that will be that kind of like third act kind of breaking apart of the alliance between Rain and Araya, And then she'll realise that Vincent was in fact manipulating her, and maybe Rain wasn't actually, or something like that. But then I'm expecting at the end of this book, there's going to be a schism between her and Vincent, as she decides to do something that sides with Rain rather than with Vincent. I think the ulterior motive that you mentioned is, despite Vincent genuinely loving her and having all this affection for her, he needs her as this almost chosen human to achieve something for his greater gains. To create a link with a human being rather than a vampire, that will give him something like the ability to walk in sunlight. Because, she's like, I don't have much to give him if I was a Koryotai. You do, being able to walk in the daytime. And like whether that was really his goal all along. He's like, of course, I grew affection for you over the years, that kind of thing. And then she's like, I was nothing but being used by you. And I have no idea how accurate that's going to be, but that's kind of what I reckon, will happen, and then she'll be teaming up with Rain. We'll see more of the vampire world, and then that second book, like bringing down Vincent.
Yeah, that I could see that as a plausible plot line. Whenever I'm reading it, all I see is like the underworld films. Like it's so hard for me to detach. I'm like literally just pulling out specific plot.
But I think that's because, and like what you're picking up on there is, I think it taps really well into quite a few vampiric archetypes and tropes, and it's using them really well. Like, you know, I mean, I haven't seen much of the underworld, but for me it was Vampire the Masquerade, like all these kind of cool, sexy vampires all leaning on things and, you know, like casually eating dripping, like bloody meats and all those kind of things. So there's the grotesqueness alongside the splendor and the beauty. Like it's exactly kind of what I pictured.
Yeah. So I'm going underworld plotline. You're going Blade, Daywalker.
They're making a Blade.
That's what's going to happen. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. It'll be interesting because I could be all of those things plus this kind of Hunger Games, you know, down with the system and you know all of that stuff going on. Yeah, it'd be interesting. I mean, onto sort of going further into Rain. I think it's really, I don't know, is it interesting, or is it just a like, I think in my head I want him to be this, whatever his name is, Edward from Twilight type of handsome, but like he's described as this absolutely enormous, like brutal looking.
Yeah, his features are so strong they're almost offensive or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Like it was that kind of approach.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and so, you know, I'm actually picturing more like a Tom Hardy type, like if you really uglied up Tom Hardy, like just a wall with like really big forward features.
Yeah, I think I had like Dave Bautista in my head, just like, and yeah, I guess that's sort of whatever his character is in Guardians of the Galaxy, but just this absolute unit. And yeah, and that's probably like, I think that's cool because I think everyone wants it to be some like super handsome or like roguish sort of.
And that's the thing, like, yeah, he stands out from all the other vampires who are all slick and smooth and kind of like classy. And he's just like, everything about him is unrefined. Like his wings look a bit ragged, the clothes he's wearing aren't perfectly fitted. You know, he is supposed to stand out because he isn't an Edward Cullen type.
Yeah, definitely. But the portrait that she sees him look at, or the painting that she sees him looking at in that kind of initial feast that she goes to, I feel like there's some relevance to that, isn't there? And you saying something about, I guess you're sort of talking about maybe some kind of prophecy or something like that she is this person. And now that you've said that, I'm starting to think about that painting and whether there's some sort of relevance to something there.
You saying prophecy is interesting because you know how they have this, and again, cool world building. Whenever the different faction takes over, they just repaint loads of the artwork so the different wings are there. So rather than the leathery bat wings, they become the feathery Rishon wings rather than the Hiaj ones. And she was like, weirdly, it still showed a Rishon falling to his death. And I wonder, like, well, how do we know that wasn't changed? Because it actually showed a Hiaj falling to their death, and they reversed it. And maybe if it is a prophecy, it's showing the downfall of a certain thing. And, you know, Vincent didn't want to see it being predicting his downfall.
Yeah.
You know? But, you know, the other option is it's depicting someone of Rain's family, you know, an event from the past that was the downfall of a member of his family when they used to rule.
Yeah. And then, and if that is the case, maybe that's the source of the beef between Rain and the King.
I'm definitely intrigued to learn more about that relationship. In fact, in terms of 2,000-year history, vampire dynasties fighting it out, all the different cultures, the powers. I love all of that kind of stuff. I think the world building's been really good so far because, you know, like the House of Blood with their blood-borne curse, I thought was really cool. And they haven't said as much, but it was making me wonder, you know how there's the big, stacked woman who's leading that team of the House of Blood?
Yeah.
And, she's the only one who seems to have a team around her. And then you had in the trial, they were fighting a bunch of bloodborne cursed vampires who turned into these demons. And one of them had a mark that when they killed that one, the others all went down. It makes you feel like that's the whole structure of their society. Like, she currently is transforming, and she has her pack around her, and when she transforms, they'll transform, and they'll become demons like them, and she'd be the one that they'd have to hit in the head to take out. Like, because you've got blood packs, blood oaths, they're all bound by blood, this kind of vibe. And so maybe that's the way they structure their society. Like, a bunch of weaker vampires bind themselves in service to a stronger one, but it has this, downside, and that they all have to kind of commit together.
Yeah. I wasn't sure about that description of the bloodborne vampires becoming demons, and whether that was a thing that always happened to bloodborne vampires, or she kind of insinuates that something separate has been done to these vampires to turn them into demons.
It's a result of the curse that some of them have. That stacked woman, she had the kind of the thing taking over.
Yeah.
I think it's that.
But she says, Araya says that she was like, I knew they had the curse that that comes with being bloodborne, but she kind of insinuates that it was never specifically about becoming demons. It was kind of they went mad.
Yeah, no, I think that was it. Like they succumb to the bloodlust, and I think if it keeps going, this is how they transform. As they, if they don't get killed by that point.
Yeah,
that was what I got from that anyway.
Yeah, I couldn't quite tell. That was the initial thing I got, and then she says something that made me think, oh, but has Nyaxia done something specific to this group and to, turned them into demons as well, or is that is that just a natural part of that that curse that they have, and yeah, like you say, they obviously start to transform a little bit during their lives, because her her appearance is changing with the stuff coming up her neck, and I thought that was a really cool first trial, though. Just the way it started with the palace just disappearing was like really exciting, and it was really annoying because it's right at the end of a chapter, isn't it? And I had to stop at that point, and I was like, oh, damn it. But and then the way it sort of kicks off, and the chaos and the description, and I think this is one of the really great things about it all being done from the first person perspective. And I know we've had examples of that being good and bad, but I do really think the way that description's been done has been really thorough and effective so far.
Yeah, definitely. You're with her in the moment.
Yeah.
Each time one of these things happens, we're not getting any extra knowledge yet. The only thing we get is kind of like Vincent's voice in her head occasionally.
But what I like is that in some parts it's written as though Araya is writing a book, and she just gives us explanations of things that we need to know. And I don't know whether you noticed that from reading it, but there's these moments where it's like, I probably need to explain sort of this, otherwise it doesn't make any sense. And there's no other way around it, really. And it's much better than unnecessary, awkward conversations that provide exposition.
Yeah, you're right. There is some kind of element of recounting rather than we're always just she's experiencing it. There perhaps there's a bit more reflection.
She describes the whole of the Kajari and what it is, and she just does it talking to us as a reader. And I think that could have been really easy for her and Vincent to be like, you need to be prepared for the Kajari. Don't you know that it's this?
Of course I know. I've known since I was 5 years old.
And it's we've literally spent 14 years preparing for this, Vincent. Why are you telling me this as though I don't know it?
That would have been a much worse way to do it.
And it's everyone in society knows what the Kajari is. You don't need to have someone explaining it as though it's the first time someone's wandered into the world. She can tell it to us as though we're wandering into the world for the first time. And I like that it's much less clumsy than some other exposition. So I guess we should do some some rough predictions. We've sort of talked about some potential ways forward. So we're 12 chapters in, cards on the table. You're not allowed to change your mind at any point after this.
Locked in.
Yeah,
Okay.
where are you going?
Well, she's not going to become a vampire. She's going to side with Rain over Vincent, but despite revelations on both sides. Her family are going to be her family, but one of or more of them will still be alive. And let's do a more short-term prediction. She's going to become best friends with Misha.
Okay. Yeah. I think I agree with some of those, but just for devil's advocate's sake, and this is probably what always causes me to just
I get in there first. Do the good ones.
Yeah. Why don't I do my predictions first?
No, sorry.
So I don't think we're going to have anything on her family stuff in terms of like actually meeting them in this book. I think that's your kind of stretch thing for book 2. But I think I agree that we are going to have building of the relationship with Rain. Vincent is going to catch wind of this and try and manipulate it and prevent that from happening. And there's going to be some kind of maybe he says something about Rain that isn't true, that turns her against Rain, but then she finds out actually that it's Vincent that's, potentially got some story that he's been withholding from her that, gives her some clarity, maybe something to do with her family or where she was before he rescued her. I think in terms of the family stuff, I think that's what we get to at the end of this book. And then the next book becomes about kind of, she's super pissed off about like all this stuff and she starts to maybe take down the system, or she finds out that she does have some of these powers and she's got some of these abilities that we didn't know, and there's like an unlocking of that potential that gives her these opportunities to really take down the system in the next book. Short term, I think Ibrahim's going to come into this a lot more. I think Misha's going to come into it a lot more, and we're going to kind of
team
have some kind of sort of team thing where she has to put her trust in people, and but then they're kind of forced, obviously, to become mortal opponents because there can be only one. So I think you're right. I think she's gonna be conflicted over maybe liking some of these people that she knows she can't really afford to like, and natural stuff in like a Hunger Gamesy type way where
she'll regret her weakness. She'll be like, I should never have become emotionally open to these people,
but it will then become her greatest strength.
Exactly.
So not like a million miles away from each other in those predictions, I don't think.
No, I think there's a lot of overlap, and I think there's not much there that doesn't sound like it couldn't possibly happen. Like none of it sounds ridiculous. It just depends on which way they choose to take the story.
I just wonder whether we're going to find out that Rain is someone really significant in Vincent's past.
Yeah,
that's just from the blurb. That's just the sort of indication that I think I was getting from that. I don't know. That's where
the blurb alone. I hadn't really thought about it much until we read the blurb. And I was like, okay, he's a bigger deal than I'd given him credit for.
I mean, we didn't even mention anything about. Well, we said about Rain and Araya becoming close. The romance from the blurb sounds like it's going to be a pretty significant element. Of what's to come.
Then we'll see the sexy side of vampires. It won't just be the blood side.
So in the next episode, we'll read up to the end of chapter 25. But in the meantime, if you want to let us know what you think, you can leave a comment on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok, and we would love to hear what you think about the first 12 chapters of The Serpent and the Wings of Night. And Also, if you want to support us, leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. That's super helpful. And yeah, we'll be back in the next episode with more. And with all that said, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.